Welcome back to Iacon, everyone. Decepticon Doug here. Let's get rolling into today's episode. Roll for it. Yeah, I went there. Why not? Roll for it takes place not long after the previous episode where Megatron was presumed dead because the Decepticons don't have much faith in their own engineering. You have to give it to this episode, they really don't waste too much time on setting things up. The best we get is a clunky bit of exposition from Starscream, who reminds everyone that he is now their leader. As clunky as that exposition is, it also seems very plausible that Starscream would just remind everyone that he's the leader about every 10 minutes. They go do a raid on the power plant, and this time the humans there know basically what to expect. Woohoo! Workers' compensation! Fortunately, the Autobots just happen to already be on their way for undisclosed reasons. Maybe Starscream is just that predictable.
They'll never figure out that I want to go to the nearest power source and raid it. I'm the best leader.
Prime, Cliffjumper, Prowl, Sideswipe, and Brawn show up to kick some tailpipe. Of course, Cliffjumper is the first to jump in and the quickest to get knocked over. Cliffjumper. We're 3 episodes in and he's basically failed at every single thing that he's done. How on earth did this guy, out of everyone, this guy, survive the movie? His first action in the series was to scout the Decepticons' position and not attack. And he failed at that. But he also failed at disobeying the orders and botched his shot against Megatron. Anyway, the Autobots win this battle because the Energon blows up, which, doesn't really help anybody, but at least the Decepticons don't have it. Already, the other Decepticons are doubting Starscream's leadership abilities, which is fair enough since he only became leader by calling dibs. Meanwhile, in Cybertron, Shockwave is able to patch Megatron through to Earth, and so he gives them a call. Hopefully he's using a 1-800 line because these long-distance charges are going through the roof. I'm dating myself again, aren't I? So they're using the Facebook Messenger. The Decepticons are shocked that Megatron is still alive, and he wants them to meet him by the space bridge so they can start their next plan. Starscream and his squad need to prepare themselves first, though. Next, we're introduced to Chip Chaser, another human ally. He's a super genius kid in a wheelchair, kind of like Wesley Crusher if Star Trek fans had their way with him. But actually, the writers, they handle this thing pretty well. Chip is physically disabled, but it really isn't something that is treated like a disability. He's in a wheelchair, but is just treated like everyone else. It doesn't really impair his day-to-day life from what we can see, because presumably by his age, he's already adapted to his surroundings and had his home life altered to maximize his ease. I don't know too much about other cartoons at the time, but as far as I know about most kids' shows in the 80s, this move seemed pretty inclusive. Anyway, Chip is led into a science place where science happens, but Reflector is watching how to get in. They want to get to the science that's in the place because they've scienced their way into developing an antimatter energy source. Pretty impressive that humanity has managed to build this kind of technology before the Transformers could, considering we are light years behind them in anything else. But hey, we need a story, and this science guy, he has science hair, and Chip, he's a good sciencer too. Reflector joins a bunch of other Decepticons to meet Megatron at the space bridge, and they get right to work to get a hold of all that science. Professor Science Hair is met by the Decepticons, and he very quickly sends the antimatter formula over to Chip over some kind of electronic network that links the computers together. That's of course a ridiculous concept and clearly a work of fiction. Dr. Science Hair then deletes the formula from his science computer and tells Megatron that he's not getting that formula, and also he banged his mom. And Megatron is like,
I know you sent it somewhere, so let's go find it. And also my mother was a saint.
Meanwhile, Prowl and Bluestreak find Starscream and his goons and begin fighting. The fight doesn't go super well for them though, and Prowl is knocked down and unable to control his own motor functions. But somehow he taps into that electronic network and Chip is able to connect to his brain and control his body. He's in his head, mastering his motor functions like some kind of headmaster. Amazing idea. I'm going to pitch it to Hasbro. Nah, they'll never go for it. Chip must play a lot of first-person shooters because he navigates Prowl like a pro and commandeers a jet, making it launch all of his missiles at the Decepticons, chasing them away. And Dad said I was wasting my life playing Fortnite. Ha! Joke's on him. But the Decepticons have tracked Chip down and plan to loot his computer for the antimatter formula. Chip figures out that that's what they're going to do, so he memorizes the formula and deletes it from his computer too. Well, this seems a little bit far-fetched. I actually do buy it. Some people really do have amazing memories like that, and it makes sense that they would excel at sciencey things where you need sciencey formulas and stuff. As you see, I am clearly not one of these people. I can't even remember my work phone number half the time. They bring Chip back to Megatron, and it turns out that Soundwave can also just extract information from his brain. This, however, I don't buy. Cybertronians exist on a planet with little to no organic matter, so it doesn't really make sense that they would naturally have the ability to read through a flesh mind. Organic life forms are very alien to them. If it was on a computer or the information was entrusted into the head of an Autobot, it makes sense that the Decepticons would be able to forcefully extract the information. This feels just kind of like the Superman effect, where they can have whatever powers the plot requires them to have in order to move forward. But this was actually easy to write around, they just didn't. The thing is, there was a perfect opening for them to. Prowl was linked up just moments ago to Chip's computer. It could easily be said that he accidentally downloaded the formula to the antimatter. The Decepticons could easily learn that connection and hunt him down to get that info, and you can't just wipe an Autobot mind like you can a computer. You would lose Prowl, so there would be a lot at stake. I mean, come on guys, don't make me do all the work, I'm just working with what you gave me here. But anyway, that's not what happens. Instead, we have a mind reader Soundwave who just takes information out of Chip's head, and the Decepticons push him aside and start building. Back to Iacon will return after these messages. We now return to Back to Iacon. The Autobots are on their way to get Chip out of there and engage the Decepticons, so they get their two sneakiest guys, Mirage and Hound, who sneak by Rumble on lookout duty. Of course, rather than sneaking, they announce that they're there, and somehow that works too. Rumble is so stunned by his own stupidity that they could have just strolled right by. I honestly can't believe Rumble is this stupid. He's just never been this dumb before. He was the guy who told Starscream that he was too dumb to usurp Megatron, which is absolutely true. I guess they felt this comedic beat was worth it, and maybe it would have been if the bit was actually funny. Though I have to remember, this was made for kids. The Autobots sneak in, rescue Chip, and zoom out of there. With Chip out of there, the remaining Autobot forces go in to fight Megatron, but Megatron has already harvested the antimatter and throws a cube at the Autobots. It explodes, and the Autobots come out in shambles. Prime orders them to return to base for repairs, and the Decepticons are not at all harmed by the explosion for some reason, perhaps because they took cover behind Starscream's arrogance. They take the antimatter cubes and leave. The Autobots get repaired by Ratchet and Sparkplug, but Megatron is wasting no time coming for an all-out attack on the Ark. Sunstreaker and Sideswipe decide that they want to zoom up and attack the jets in midair, and they get knocked down and realize that it was a stupid plan, because it was a stupid plan. Megatron plugs the antimatter cubes in himself and turns into his gun mode, proclaiming that he's the most powerful weapon in the universe. I'm sure that's a common pep talk he gives himself, probably in the mirror after a bad sexual episode.
She was the problem, not me. I'm the most powerful weapon in the universe.
Now, of course, we're not in the movie yet, so we can't just start gunning the Autobots down dead. But I do think that the most powerful weapon in the universe proclamation may have been a bit of an overstatement, since he basically blew up a rock. Skywarp starts blasting around like he's never held a gun before in his life, and Wheeljack asks Chip and Spike to help him with an invention of his. So Spike jackhammers a hole in Skywarp's leg, and Chip plugs in the device. The Autobots now have control over Skywarp, and he starts shooting and missing everyone, just like he was already doing. Megatron calls him an idiot and discovers that the antimatter cubes are unstable and he needs to eject them before he explodes. The Decepticons retreat, and the Autobots are like, "Yay, Chip, he's not half bad for a puny human." Roll for It isn't really a great episode because the writers really dropped the ball on following up on their own work. There was this opportunity with Prowl that I mentioned before, but also with the episode's resolution. They seemed to miss the whole point that the episode was trying to make. The whole time, Chip is proving his value through his incredible mind. He saved Prowl and Bluestreak through their link-up. He helped develop and instantly memorize the antimatter formula, but at the end, they resolve the problem because Wheeljack has a random invention and he wants to try it out. And Chip just rolls over and plugs it in. But this invention basically does the same thing that Chip was already doing with Prowl earlier in the episode. So why couldn't Chip be the one with the invention that saves the day? Because he already got insight from being plugged into Prowl's brain earlier. I mean, the writers practically handed themselves this through line of story cohesion and then just didn't do it. I mean, keep in mind, this is just me watching this series for the second time, the first time in probably a decade. It's not like I've been stewing on these episodes constantly. These are just things I'm picking up on because it all seems obvious. Anyway, I'm giving Roll for It. Roll for It because he's in a wheelchair. Okay, I get it. Anyways, it's 2 out of 5. I like Chip as a character, and this is a nice introduction to who he is, but the animation is extra sloppy, and the story is all over the place. Starscream really needed a whole episode to show how incapable a leader he is before Megatron returned, but he only gets like 4 minutes. And of course, the story doesn't really capitalize on the notion that the antimatter was unstable. So the Decepticons can't make it anymore, and I guess that the scientific leap for humanity wound up being a bit of a false start. It just isn't addressed, and it leaves the story feeling really incomplete. And then there were all the other things I mentioned before. I guess when they made this show back in the 80s, they weren't expecting a guy in their 30s to dissect these episodes. Just like back in the 60s, they weren't expecting Doctor Who to be remembered, so they just destroyed tons of these classic episodes, like most of the first and second Doctor episodes. They just didn't understand the lasting value of the show until it was too late. But thankfully, we still have all of Transformers right here. But what this illustrates is, art should be preserved, and so artists should always put their best foot forward, because you never know when some loser on the internet will try and upstage you.